The Women's World Chess Championship match is underway, and the reigning world champion, Ju Wenjun, is having a difficult time. She lost very painfully in game 2, which means that Tan Zhangyi takes the lead, 1.5-half. In this video, we will find out what is going to happen in game 3. A very exciting game, I can tell you, and make sure to watch it from the beginning till the end, as Ju Wenjun opens here with the move 1e4. That's what she played also in the first game of the match. After c5, again a Sicilian, knight f3, e6. Here Ju Wenjun deviates from that game in which she went for the open Sicilian. She played some sideline, but really didn't get much of an advantage at all. Now, there followed the move c4. So white is aiming for a Maroczy bind type of setup in the center. Knight c6. Here the move d4 is played. Pawn takes d4, knight takes d4. Again, it's a Sicilian Taimanov variation. And, well, the main move here is to develop the knight to f6. But Tan Zhangyi drops a little surprise by playing the move bishop b4 check. Now, this has not often been seen in Grandmaster play. One idea could be to block here with the bishop, but Ju Wenjun play the move knight c3. And still, if you do play knight f6, we are getting back in very well-known, heavily main lines of the Taimanov variation. But instead, the knight was developed to e7. This looks a little bit artificial, but in a way it's not too bad. And it leads to a very fresh, original position, which has never really seen before. What can white do? Move like knight b5 with the idea to go to d6 might be an interesting move, but Ju Wenjun played, after a few minutes here, the move bishop e2. And black played the move d5. Pawn takes d5, pawn takes d5, knight takes c6, recapturing towards the center with a pawn. And now white decided here to castle, and so did black. And we get a position in which, after taking on d5, black recaptures with a pawn. And you can say that white is a little bit better here. Why? I think the pawn on d5 is potentially a weakness, and white has ideas to attack it. That's what happened in the game. Bishop f3 was played. So here the pawn on d5 has been attacked 3 times. And, well, black can defend it one more time. And, well, different ways of playing here. You may consider maneuvering the knight to e2 and then to d4, or even to f4. You can put a bishop on e3. There's a lot of play, but there is this potential in the position that everything gets swapped on the queen side, like we have seen also in earlier games in the match. So not much remains on the board in that case, but white should try to keep those pawns as long as possible on the board, as that can become a major trump later on. Anyway, bishop g5 was played, intensifying the pressure against the knight, and so indirectly also against the pawn on d5. Bishop takes knight, eliminating the attacker, giving up the bishop pair, and saying that this pawn can also become a weakness. But there's rook c8, attacking the pawn on c3, and white played queen a4. That's a good move. If you take on c3, I take on a7, and this outside passed pawn is way more dangerous than the pawn on d5. h6 played, and well, now the bishop goes back to d2 to support the pawn on c3. And well, actually the position is, it's quite okay for black. I mean, you got to do something about that pawn probably. That's what happened in the game. There followed the move a5. It's not the only move, but now after rook e1, I would like to improve this knight. One idea could be to play knight f5 and to get the knight over to a beautiful square on c4. That gives more stability, as the pawn would defend the knight on c4, and the knight can support the pawn, freeing the queen. I don't think that black is having a difficult position here, but black instead played rook c4. Now the queen goes to a3. Knight goes to f5. The bishop goes to e2 to kick the rook away. Here rook c8 was played. And now rook d1 on the board. So white centralizes the rooks. Still you can play a move like knight d6, but well, the bishop can be improved in that case to d4, and that would be just a bit better for white probably. Anyway, no knight d6. Queen d6 was played, offering the exchange of queens. If you do take, then black gets what she wants. But instead there followed this move. Queen takes pawn on a5. Rook a8. Black is aiming for simplifications. Queen to b4. Rook takes pawn. And now, very interesting moment. White is not going to take on d6 right away, but instead played here bishop f4 to attack the queen. That's a very clever move. Black would love to exchange queens, but not to improve white's pawn structure here. You can see that the bishops are excellent pieces, as well as the rook, which can get behind the passed pawn. And I think, well, it's quite dangerous, as the bishop also controls the b8 square. So, no exchange of queens. Black keeps the queens on the board here with queen c6, but then the queen comes under an attack. Bishop b5, queen b6, counterattack, guys. Look at that pawn on f2. White got to defend here with rook e2, neutralizing the threats along the second rank. Rook f to a8, defending the other rook. And now the bishop goes back to d3. Everything's still well protected. White wants to aim for simplifications here. But there's rook a1, threatening something along the back rank. Therefore, white goes back, rook e1. Rook takes rook. Rook takes back. And now, okay, queens are hanging. You may keep queens on the board here with queen c6. Queen d8 was played. To be honest, looks a bit passive. And personally, I felt queen c6 is a much easier move to keep the pawn defended, control the c-file. It remains to be seen if white has really a pull here or not. After queen d8, h3, giving some luft for the king. Queen f6, rook e1. With the idea that after rook c8, black is attacking the pawn on c3. But white can answer it with bishop to e5. Queen under an attack, queen goes to g5. You hit the rook again, trying to force the rook to go to an inferior square. Rook a8 played, bishop f4, attacking the queen again. And white is playing very, very nice moves all the time, going after the black pieces. And well, you may even consider playing super actively, but it's understandable that black keeps the rook on the back rank to guard its pieces. It's a harmonious setup. But again, bishop c7. This is such a frustrating game that white is still creating new threats against the black rook. Rook can go to d7. I think it was not played because of bishop c8. In that case, after rook takes c7, bishop takes e6. You cannot take the bishop with your pawn because it allows queen b8 with a double attack. You can, though, move your rook to c4. And it looks as if after queen b8, king h7, you take on d5, take on c3, that black has succeeded in trading off everything on the queen side. And this should be a very, very dead draw. Instead, rook f8 was played, rook d1, attacking the pawn on d5 one more time. Queen g5. And now the game spices up here with bishop takes d5. White is taking the pawn. But of course, white should have seen that there is knight e3. What a spectacular move. With an attack against the rook and the bishop. And also opening up the path along the fifth rank. If you do take on e3, it's bishop takes d5. And with the threat of taking the pawn on e3, black is okay. Of course, there's also a mating threat on g2. So no problems here for black at all. However, instead of taking the knight, look at this move. Very cool idea. h4. Attacking the queen. There's no mate, guys, on g2 because the bishop still defends the pawn. So that means the queen got a move. Or, and that was actually not played in the game, knight takes d5. How about this move? It looks like after taking here, you can take the queen. Black can take the queen as well. And after something like a rook c8 to force the bishop to go away, there are very good drawing chances. But you never know with such a passed pawn. Anyway, queen g4 was the game's continuation. Queen takes queen. Take with the bishop. No time to take the knight as the rook is attacked by the bishop as well. Rook d3, attacking the knight. Knight takes d5, rook takes d5. And all of a sudden, we are in an endgame in which white is still a pawn up. That's a very, very important pawn. But opposite colored bishops, if rooks are going to be exchanged, then it will be very difficult to cross a light square for the white c pawn. But there are still rooks on the board. That gives white some additional chances. Bishop b6, rook e6, rook d6, king f8. Bishop d4, king e7, attacking the rook. Rook goes away. And well, question is how to deal with the threat of the pawn on G7. Maybe a move like F6 could be considered when it will be difficult for the bishop to attack the base of the chain, the pawn on G7. I think that makes definitely some sense. Instead, G6 was played, placing a pawn on a light square, but that has other drawbacks. King H2, activating the king. Very important technique. H5, King G3. King is coming around. Rook A5, trying to set up a defense along the 5th rank so that the white king cannot cross the middle of the board. King F4, King D7, G3, Rook F5, King E3, Rook A5 back, Rook to B4, with ideas to bring up the C pawn, Bishop to D5, and now Bishop to B6 was played. After Rook A3, attacking the pawn, King D4, attacking the bishop, Bishop goes back, Bishop C5, White is not in a rush, tries to slowly increase the position. But now, very important move for Black could have been here, Rook A5, and I don't really see how you can walk in with your king. That's a big problem. Looks like Black is able to hold here, but Rook A2 is also an understandable move. If you do play King E5, still Rook A5 is a good move to pin the bishop, and the king can only go back now. Instead, King D3 played. The bishop defends the pawn. No time to take it. Bishop F5, King E3, Bishop E6. Where is White's progress? Bishop to D4, King C6. And now finally, the pawn is moving up the board. King C7, the pawn comes to C5. Now, the pawn has significantly improved. But what should be Black's strategy? Again, prevent the white king from infiltrating Black's position. The key move here is Bishop D7. It was not played in the game. The idea is that you're able to put your rook on A4 as the exchange of rooks would be great. If the rook goes away, then you have full control over the 4th rank and the king cannot easily walk in. I think that's the defensive strategy. Instead, Bishop D5 played, but now it's King F4. Excellent move. Bishop to C6 was played in the game. Maybe a better idea would have been to play Rook E2 to cut off the king along the E file, and after something like King G5, there is Rook E4, and here again, you're pinning the bishop. That's very important, which means that the rook is immobile. It cannot go away, and looks like Black is still able to hold, but Bishop C6 is a serious mistake. And now White comes in with the king. Rook A4, now Bishop E5, only move, of course, to give this check, to avoid the exchange of rooks. King D7, the rook goes back to the 2nd rank to defend the pawn from the side. King E6, Bishop F4, Rook C4, and now Bishop E3. Nice double task for the bishop, defending both pawns. And here the white rook can also infiltrate. Bishop D7, Rook D8, Bishop E6, Rook D6, supporting the pawn from the side at some point. There are ideas also to go Bishop F4, or after Rook C2, the king walks in. Very, very impressive king march. Where's the king going? Well, I think the plan is simple. You would like to go over there and probably support your c-pawn. That's the simple plan. King F6 trying to stop that. Rook D1. Rook goes back all the way. Rook C4, Rook D6, Rook C2. Bishop D4 check. And look at this. If you go King E7, it's King G7. And there is this threat of Bishop F6. King goes back. And then this Rook D8 with checkmate. King, therefore, got to go back to F5. And Ju Wenjun played very nice move, F3. And again, the king cannot do much here at all. Rook C4, C6, Rook C2, King C7. And the king is on her way to D8. G5 played, take. And, well, the plan here is to bring the pawn forward. So Bishop B6 is a beautiful move. But there's one amazing way to convert here. With Bishop F6 was not played, but it's very instructive. As you give a check, and if the king goes to F5, you have this move Rook D4 with another mating pattern. Look at this king. It's caught in a mating net. You gotta move the bishop. If you take the pawn, it's checkmate on F4. If you move the bishop, it's Rook E4. Beautiful idea. As now you're threatening Rook E5 and the king cannot escape via E6. If you do play this move, Rook C5, you play the move C7 and the rook is overloaded. It cannot defend both the E5 square and the threat of promoting the pawn. If you take on c7, it's mate. And if you play bishop e6, well, it is rook f4 with mate again. Missed opportunity, but nevertheless, white's position remains completely winning. Bishop to b6, excellent move. King f5, and you see the pawn is already on c7. Now, the black rook cannot leave the c file. If the rook goes to another file, there's always rook takes e6, eliminating the defender of the promotion square, so that you're enabling your c pawn to queen. Therefore, the rook stays on c3, bishop a5, rook c5, rook a6, rook c4, and now king f8. Excellent move. Bishop to d5, king comes to e7, following the plan. Look at this. If you take the pawn on f3, it's rook f6, and you're threatening to take the bishop. Whether you go to g4 or e4 doesn't make a difference. Let's say king g4, it's rook f4, and you succeed in deflecting the rook. Rook takes, c8, queen with check before you capture the rook on f4. After king e7, there followed h4, rook f6. Now, again, if the king goes to g5, you're caught in a mating net. Bishop d2, king h5, rook h6. Beautiful mate with rook and bishop and these two pawns. Therefore, instead the king went to e5, and now g takes h4. As I said, the rook cannot leave the c file, therefore the pawn stays on the board, and we use it as a way to deflect the rook. We can bring up the h pawn, rook c5, h6. Again, you cannot leave the c file. If you take the bishop, it's rook takes e6 check, and the c pawn promotes. In the game there followed, therefore, bishop c8, first moving the bishop away, but now it is h7, and there's nothing which can be done against the promotion of the h pawn. Absolutely amazing performance after 87 moves, 5.5 hours of play. Game 3 was won by white, by Ju Wenjun. Black resigned, and therefore the match is tied again, 1.5, 1.5. And as you have seen also in the previous videos, fantastic, very instructive endgames. The players are very even, very level, even strength of both players. So very curious to see what this match is going to bring. Very nice endgame play by Ju Wenjun, and happy for her that she managed to tie the score. Also for the neutral viewers, including myself, I'm very curious to see what's going to happen. Do you like this video? You know what to do. Subscribe to the channel, and I will see you soon again. And let's see what this Women's World Championship match has more in store for us.